Hello, this is a short video presentation on solving radical equations, part 1. The steps to solving radical equations is very simple. First thing we have to do, and we've done this before with other equations, is isolate the radical. Secondly, we square both sides. Solve, just like we have been. We'll have linear and quadratic equations. Solve, and lastly, sadly, we need to do checks. Checks are an important part of solving radical equations. Sometimes our answers don't work because the actual equation we're solving is different. Once you get rid of the square root, it's a different equation. All right, let's look at our first example. 2 plus 5 square root of x plus 5 equals 12. All right, I want to isolate the radical. I want to get this guy right here by itself. I'm going to use a different color. All right, I'm going to actually erase this, and I'm going to use yellow. I want to get that radical by itself. All right, first thing I'm going to do, and we've been doing this all year, subtract 2. And then I have 5 times the radical x plus 5 is equal to 10. Divide by 5, divide by 5, and now my radical is by itself. X plus 5 is equal to 2. Now I square both sides. And this is the part where those of you concerned about your grade get into trouble. You cannot do this. This means nothing in mathematics. It's a lonely 2 floating out there in space. You must use parentheses. You must use parentheses. And the radical squared is just x plus 5 equals 4. I subtract 5. X is equal to negative 1. So my solution is negative 1. And then I check. 2 plus 5 square root of negative 1 plus 5 equals 12. 2 plus 5 times the square root of 4. 2 plus 5 times 2. 2 plus 10. 12 is equal to 12. It checks. All right, that's all there is to it. All right, let's look at our next one. We can also have equations with radicals on both sides. We've already isolated the radical. There's nothing to it. If it had been radical minus radical equals 0, then you would just add the radical to both sides. But we don't have that, so we square both sides. Again, you must use parentheses. If you don't, I will take points off. All right, 3x plus 14 equals 2 minus x. I add x to both sides, subtract 14, and we get 4x equals, these cancel, 2 minus 4, negative 12, divide by 4, x is equal to negative 3. So our answer is negative 3, and we do our check. Square root of 3 times negative 3 plus 14 equals square root of 2 minus negative 3. Square root of 5, negative 9 plus 14, square root of 5 is equal to the square root of 5. And it checks. All there is to it. Square both sides. All right. Our first example, outside of the radical, was a number. Now we have an x, have our variable, but we add x to both sides to isolate the radical, and we have x is equal to square root of negative 40 plus 13x. We then square both sides. We must use parentheses. Have I said that enough? And we end up with x squared equals negative 40 plus 13x. We have a quadratic equation, so I'm going to factor. I add 40, subtract 13x. I add 40, subtract 13x. And I get x squared minus 13x plus 40 equals 0. I'm going to factor x minus 5, x minus 8, and we do our double smiley, 5x and 8x is 13x, negative, and we get 5 and 8 for an answer. And then we check. 0 equals the opposite of 5 plus square root of negative 40 plus 13 times 5. Negative 5 equal or plus the square root of 65 minus 40. Just switching the order there. Negative 5 plus the square root of 25. Negative 5 plus 5. 0 equals 0. We're good to go. And 0 equals opposite of 8 plus square root of negative 40, 13 times 8. Negative 8 plus the square root of 80 to 104 minus 40. Negative 8 plus the square root of 64. Negative 8 plus 8. Zero is equal to 0, and it checks. Not to be put off here, the next one won't check. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Our last example, we have the variable and a number outside the radical. I add 1 to both sides. And I get x plus 1 equals the square root of 5x plus 55. I square both sides. Again, must use parentheses. And x plus 1, remember, x plus 1 times x plus 1, and you have to multiply x times x times 1, 1 times x, 1 times 1, and we end up with x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals, I lost my 5x plus 55. Subtract 5x, subtract 55, and we have x squared minus 3x minus 54 equals 0. Factor x minus 9, x plus 6. So our answer is 9 and negative 6. All right. We do our check. Oops. Start with negative 6. Negative 6 equals negative 1 plus 5 times negative 6 plus 55. Negative 6 equals negative 1 plus square root of negative 30 plus 55. Negative 6 equals negative 1 plus square root of 25. Negative 1 plus 5. Negative 6 equals 4. Does not check. Negative 6 is not an answer. You then need to check 9. 9 equals negative 1 plus square root of 5 times 9 plus 55. And I'll leave the rest of the check up to you. This video is already way too long, but 9 will work in the check, and then we're done. All right, have a great day, and I'll talk to you later.